you were at the RNC 2004, I believe. So this is like the height of the Bush era. We're the same age. That, for the kids watching, George Bush, no matter how hard the neoliberals want to sanitize him, he killed hundreds of millions of people. So, let's just put that out there right now. So we were showing up in the streets, our generation, as we were in college, showing up in the streets protesting the Iraq War and even the war in Afghanistan, post 9/11 generation. So you went to the RNC in 2004. What did you experience there?
What a mess. And so many parallels to the RNC this week. But so to set the table a little bit, so Bush was going for a second term. We were about a year and a half into the anti-war movement having cohered in that phase of it. And, a lot of the street heat that was going on was both coming from that movement and then also from what was called the global justice movement, or, at the time it was often popularly known as the anti-globalization movement.
WHO,
and so
those folks.
Yeah, WTO, yeah. And the
clearly my mind is where the pandemic is right now. Thank you.
Totally. I mean, how can it not be?
WHO's, yeah.
How can it not be? I mean, and yeah, we could talk about. Well, I digress. The milieu of that movement was a mixture of labor, environment, and also a number of frontline people of color, base building organizations that were primarily in solidarity with the global South around debt relief and things like that. And at the RNC in 2004, basically that moment was a lot of outrage at Giuliani in particular with his exploitation of 9/11. New Yorkers hated it. And the GOP chose to have their convention in New York for propaganda reasons in order to build on and exploit 9/11. And which I know we were just talking about this last night, but it's just wild that more Americans have died of coronavirus during the RNC this year than died in 9/11. And how much that was just peak 9/11 exploitation moment. And so there was a call out for grassroots activists to come disrupt the convention or even attempt to shut it down. And, there wasn't a lot of strategy to it at the time, but the main purpose was to provide a counter narrative to that, to say, New Yorkers don't actually want you here. You're not the heroes of New York. And so, the other piece of that landscape was there was a coalition called Still We Rise, which was about 50 or more local base building, grassroots, poor people's organizations, people of color groups, and groups like ACT UP. And another piece of context I'll just share before jumping into the story, since I'm just meeting your audience for the first time, is that, so I've spent about 15 years as a civil disobedience coordinator and trainer, and with a group called the Ruckus Society primarily. And that has looked like, it's not a role that I play much anymore, but it's been doing multi-sectoral movement work with grassroots campaigns that are looking at a moment where they need to escalate and add, escalate pressure on their target. And so in that regard, a lot of the nonviolent direct action, civil disobedience was planned, purposeful. I've been arrested many times, and it was always with a level of intention. And I only tell arrest stories really when I'm training activists for the sake of drawing out tactical lessons. And I've never told this one before. So this is a Nomiki show exclusive because this is actually the first time I was arrested, and there was no strategy to it at all. There's very few tactical lessons you can pull from it. But I also, have a bit of caution sharing stories like this because I think it's weird to romanticize arrests. So just want to also state that. But the reason the 2004 RNC was significant, we need to go back in time one further year to Miami. There was a mass mobilization in 2003 against the FTAA, which was the expansion of NAFTA. And it was an experiment in the militarization of repression of mass demonstrations. So, the police have a long history in this country of varying forms and models of mass repression. This was a hard pivot towards a new way of being. It was called the Miami model. And in that moment, there was about 500,000 people coming out from the movement that I described earlier, which are, primarily teachers, unions, farmers, students. And some of the architecture of the Miami model included mass surveillance that has always happened with social movements, but it was at a new technological scale than had ever happened before. It included things like embedding journalists with cops in protest scenarios, which was happening. That was part of the propaganda of the Iraq War, if you remember, that journalists would go embedded behind enemy lines. And so it was leaning on that rhetoric to paint activists as terrorists, because that was the lexicon of, that was the, fear-mongering of the moment. And so it was the most sophisticated, coordinated PR that police departments had ever done in terms of mass mobilizations. And so as there were sort of journalists that were really trained to have an us versus them mentality in their relationship to protesters versus police, there was also all of this new level and mandate for statewide interdepartmental cooperation, the mass purchase of all kinds of military toys, in addition to what are now, called less lethal weapons, all kinds of new forms of tear gas, sound cannons, things like that. It was also the pioneering of, the creation of what were called free speech zones, of where the police would specifically strategically say, where are protesters trying to get to? We're going to cordon that off and prevent them from getting there. New relationship to barricades and fences, things like that. It was also when there was new tactics emerging, like kettling, which is really common now.
Explain what kettling is to folks, which is real fun.
So kettling is basically where the police try to herd protesters onto a block, and when they get on that block, they pop up a bunch of usually like orange netting, and then pop up orange netting on the other side, and then you're caught in the kettle, and it's just a mass arrest of everyone who is on the block. And it was also, the last thing I'll just say about the Miami model is it was really Trumpian in the sense that it was all about a show of force. Like police would be doing PR, training drills in public, and it would be, press hits in order to intimidate people. And at the end of that 2003 demonstration, the Miami Police Department paid out over $500,000 in police brutality settlements. And
whoa.
Yeah, it was extreme. And, extreme for the time, not extreme anymore, or even the next year, because the reason why the Republican National Convention in 2004 is significant was it was a specific attempt to nationalize the Miami model and to prototype it so that it could be used in police departments around the country, and also explicitly be done in coordination with the major political party.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.